Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Power Driven Podcast. Today, we're going to have a fun topic, one that everybody talks about, wonders about, debates about. We're talking about EGT, or what do you call it?
EGTs.
EGTs. And why do you call it EGTs?
Because if you like sound out EGT.
Sounds like EGTs.
It's EGTs.
People also call it turbine inlet temperatures. What would you call that one?
Todd's Insane Turbo Systems. Trick question.
Anyway, guys, we are talking about turbine inlet temperature, EGT, all the things that matter.
Not to be confused with EGTs, because exhaust gas temperatures. Well, it depends how many cylinders you're monitoring. I guess if you have more than one probe, you could call it EGTs. Most people do that. Also spell Cummins with a G. It's Cummings.
Yeah. We are talking about that. But anyway, guys, real quick, if you would, we're having a lot of good comments on this. We appreciate all the feedback we're getting. If you could share this podcast, subscribe to it so we can help the algorithm. People have spoken. They want the longer format. So we're not we're going to try to keep this around an hour, give or take. But help us out. Hit that subscribe and like button. And we're talking about everything EGT. So what do people need to know about EGT? What is it? Why is it important?
So I think the most important thing is you have to remember they're just a number.
EGTs are just a number.
Just a number. That's all.
Basically, everything you data log is technically a number.
Yeah, but this is just a number.
Just a number. Okay.
Things are numbers and something else. They mean something, EGTs.
Just a number.
They don't. I'm kidding.
What's amazing is how divisive EGTs are. I remember one time Todd and I were driving cross country. We were picking up, it was a race car chassis, remember? And we were towing in my white 08 Dodge. And my EGT probe had broken and it started throwing off erroneous numbers. And so I started taking pictures and posting on social media. It was like, EGTs are just a number. And was it 2,300 or 24? It was something like that.
Something ridiculous.
And good old Merlin's old school garage. He's kind of like the Cummins guy back when Welder Up, those Vegas Rat Rod shows a deal. That was like their Cummins expert. And Merlin's like, you two knuckleheads, you keep doing that, you're going to be pulling molten aluminum off the side of the road. And I responded like
just a number.
Chill out, Han Solo or something like that, or young Padawan, some real Merlin's a great guy. But anyway, the gauge was broken, but it's amazing how well you can rile at people talking about EGT numbers. People will get mad at you
if you don't watch EGT on your engine. Like, you're an idiot and I hate you for not watching EGT on your engine. Like, it's my engine, man. Give me a break. No, I don't like you. You can make people mad with that.
No, it's true.
No. So give a little context, what do you see on stock trucks normally, to give people a reference of, because if you don't know anything about EGTs, you don't know if 100 is a big number or if 2,300 is a big number.
So the only time I've ever measured EGTs that I can remember on a bone stock truck was my old 12 valve back in the Farm, Missouri days. And I put
we're talking 94 to 98 Dodge Ram.
96, 215 manual truck.
215 horsepower.
215 horsepower. Don't sell me short there. And I'd put gauges on it, and I was super excited because I want to do everything the form right way, where you put gauges on it first, and then you start modding it. And that's the right answer, but sometimes it's easy to get a little carried away first. But I was like, I want to do this right. So I hooked up my EGTs and a couple other gauges, and I took just a rip down a road, went up a grade with no trailer at all, and I hit 1,200 and some degrees. And I was like, wow, how am I supposed to add power to this and still keep it cool? Because if I hit over 1,250, it's going to melt my pistons. And then I kind of realized that they are mostly just a number.
So 1,250 degrees is kind of the standard.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about, what's your EGT? Never go over 1,250. 1,250 is the limit. You over that, you're in meltdown mode. Why is 1,250 the number?
So, I think semi-truck guys, truckers have opinions of their own, and they've seen a lot of crap, so I can't argue with them. One thing is most of those guys are putting it post-turbo, and there's a huge temperature decrease when you put it post-turbo.
Oh, yeah.
Generally about, call it 100 degrees per 10 pounds of boost. Very approximate. So if you're making 20, 30 pounds of boost, you're dropping 200, 300 degrees after the turbo.
That's exhaust gas going into the turbo and after turbo. If you measure both sides, you're about 200 to 300 degree difference.
Yeah, at that
20 to 30 pounds boost. Okay.
Yep. But I think one reason a lot of people latched onto it is that is the melting point for aluminum.
Yep.
And your pistons are aluminum. And so that makes sense. If the hottest temperature in the engine will melt your piston if it gets higher than the temperature of the piston's melting point. Simple.
So do you think these people believe that the exhaust, after it's burned and is now in the exhaust tract, is the same temperature as peak combustion temperature in the combustion cycle. Because I would personally believe when the flame is there, it's hotter there before it expands in the piston and comes out. So if 1250 is the magic number there, I think the piston seemed quite a bit hotter in 1250 on the fire. What do you think?
I mean, I wish I had a bell to ding, like ding, ding, ding. Correct. Yes. The combustion temperatures are much higher. There's all kinds of dynamics going on. There's thermal boundary layers and stuff. Like the temperature in the middle of the cylinder isn't necessarily the temperature right at the cylinder wall, right on the surface of the aluminum. There's all kinds of little, things going on in thermodynamics there. And so I don't really know if a lot of people know the exact temperature in there, but I guarantee you it's much higher than the temperature 5 feet out in the exhaust stream or 6 inches out, depends where you're measuring.
Which is the fact that it starts combustion at high compression, which we know high compression is crazy for heat.
Yeah.
And by the time it leaves, it has decompressed that cylinder fully. And so you have a ton of heat is done by the time it actually leaves the cylinder.
I mean, you could just look at the auto ignition temperature of diesel before the engine's running. When it's just pumping cold air, when it compresses that up, I'll bet it's over 600 degrees in the cylinder just from air. And so if you measured that exhaust coming out, just cranking the engine over before it's running, it would say the exhaust gas temperature was 72 degrees, but the inside the cylinder temperature is over 600. So
it has to be. It's way, way hotter. And then you're talking about boundary layers and stuff. Like, is the piston actually seeing that heat? Yeah, there's a couple levels, but like, we're not saying like don't actually look at your gauges while you're towing. That is a good idea. But I think an oil temperature gauge is a far more important thing I don't know if I'd say that, but oil temperature is the more of a cause of melted pistons than EGTs themselves.
So first, I think we need to build a little background of why you even care about EGT.
Okay.
And I think it depends on what your application is. If you're towing, it might be different than if you're building a hot rod race truck on what you're actually trying to monitor the EGT.
Yeah.
Like on a tow truck, why do you care about EGT? Like you personally, why do you care about EGT? Or you, Todd? Actually, you don't ever look at your EGTs when you're towing.
About EGTs.
I just said EGTs and you only have one. I'm guilty.
On my tow truck, yes, on my tow truck. Now, on my race truck, I do have EGTs, but on my tow truck, I do have EGT.
So do you have just one temperature? Is that?
I have one exhaust gas temperature. That's measuring. It's measuring an average temperature. So I should say
wrong.
EGT, average exhaust gas temperature. That's what I'm actually measuring.
It seems wrong in my brain.
Acronyms right.
Like, I say EGTs all the time, and like maybe I am the dumb one. It's very possible.
It rolls off the tongue better than EGT. So forgive us for being rednecks. We're calling it EGTs.
So I'm going to answer my own dumb question. What do I care about when I'm towing with my EGT gauge? Why do I care? Two things. One, I know the hotter the EGT is, most likely the combustion temperature is hotter. And so I am closer to the melting point of aluminum. And when you melt your pistons, bad things happen. Generally, when I had a 12 valve and I was towing a lot, I use that as a way to almost monitor the load on the engine. If my EGT was running higher than normal, I knew that in my automatic, I'd probably be better off to go down a gear, change the speed. I mean, a perfect example. I towed your truck with my 12 valve early on in our business. We went over to Colorado.
Yeah.
And on the way back, my EGT was really high. I'm like, man, it's like 150 degrees higher than normal. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. And then I realized there was a headwind, like a nasty headwind. And I was like, why is my EGT higher than normal? To me, I use that as like, do I have a brake dragging? Are my trailer brakes dragging? Do I have a low tire? Do I have a boost leak? So to me, it's almost like a
safety check.
Learn your rig and then learn what it's normally doing. And if it starts doing something out of the ordinary, question things.
The second time I used it early on in my career, I had a manual 5-speed 99 Dodge, 24 valve Cummins. And I'd always go up to this Mount Charleston above Las Vegas. And it's like up there over 8,000 feet climb. You're starting in the hot desert. And I noticed, and at that time, that was before I knew a lot about like fan clutches. I think the fan clutch was a little worn out on my truck. And I would like get my coolant temp overheat when I'd go up there with just a little bit of weight in the bed of the truck. Like I had a job up there, like construction, and I'd haul like, a couple 100 pounds of stuff, and my coolant temp would get warm going up the mountain. And I learned from my EGT, but I'm a manual, so I can pick the gear that in fourth gear, sometimes I'd be better off to kind of scream it in third than kind of lug it in fourth, because it's kind of slower speeds, or fifth, because I had the power to pull the whole mountain in fifth gear. And I could use my EGT, and if I kept that number lower, my coolant temp would stay in check better. Yeah. So I kind of use that as like almost like a, depending on how hot the day was and how much load I had, man, if my EGT was around 1200, my coolant temp would start going up. If I could keep it like 1150 range, I would never, overheat the coolant. Mm-hmm. And so, and obviously a truck is more than capable, that truck's more than capable of hauling anything in the bed up there if the fan clutch is working. But me being a dum-dum, I had a bad fan clutch and didn't know. And so
you can't tell much.
So that's kind of the two main things. I used it kind of health on the truck and that. Yeah. I take that same truck down the drag strip, EGT would hit 1800 degrees. Didn't care about it. Yeah. To me, short duration duty, high EGT to me is like a fun fact to look at. Meant nothing to me. Yeah. When I had a 400 to 500 horsepower truck.
I think like Myra's saying, like I've never hurt pistons from high EGT. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's always another factor that, like you would say, your EGT may be like a indicator of something's going on. Yeah. But in the common rails, they're always melted from injectors hanging open. This is a feeling issue. Definitely, I've had pistons rip apart from plugged oil jets. Mm-hmm. So if your oil is too hot or no oil at all, I mean, the
EGT gauge didn't tell you anything in that situation until it ripped the piston.
So the reality is aluminum expands, and you have clearances in your engine between your piston and your piston wall clearance. And we set those larger as performance goes up for a reason, because if you're adding more heat to the aluminum and it expands more, we need more room for that piston to grow. And so that's really, like, say, know your truck and kind of build your truck for what you want to do if you're building an engine, and take that into account. So I've never melted a piston, but I sure as heck have scuffed pistons. Yeah. And that would be a more concern to me of EGT, but really it's your oil temperature you're talking about, because that's what cools your pistons. Yeah. You're talking about that a little bit. Yeah. And so coolant temp also be huge on pulling heat out. And so it's a really big deal. But the thing that EGT has hurt me on is turbos. Yeah. I have melted my share of turbine wheels, turbine housings, taking out turbos downstream. That's what the EGT, like, so I mean, for me, I actually like turbine inlet temperature, because that's the thing that's actually going to hurt if you have a high enough. And I have definitely done that.
So on a race truck, you could argue that putting the probe post turbo is pointless because your primary failure point you've experienced is melting the turbine wheel with such high
turbine wheel,
inlet temperature. And so measuring the after temperature is like,
I mean, it's true. It's like crazy. Like, I mean, you get into diesel performance, you're like, okay, I'm going to turn my truck, got to watch my EGTs. And then as you start, working your way up the chain.
That's if you have two probes, though. If you have one, it's just EGT.
All right. You need to time out with a joke. But
I never ran an EGT gauge on the junker.
There it is.
Boom.
Had to get that in there. Right?
It has been a minute. I was kind of surprised how long this one's going.
I was like, really? Nothing? I guess that makes sense.
The comment didn't fit, but I had to put it in there to force the junker into the conversation.
Anyway, when you start moving up, you start making like 1,000 horsepower, going up from there. It's like I've never been concerned about melting my pistons. Yeah. If I know EGTs are high, I'm going to melt my turbine wheel first. Yep. And hurt valves. Like, that's kind of it. Mm-hmm. I mean,
neither of which are aluminum.
Yeah. Both are actually designed specifically to handle a lot of heat.
Yes.
And those stock pistons, like, I mean,
now one difference in your experience set that might differ from another guy racing, you don't run forged pistons in your truck. You run OEM style pistons, or even used OEM pistons that have
not
a cooling cavity.
Just OEM pistons.
Just OEM used pistons
from the scrap bin
that have a cooling cavity, so that oil cooling has more of an effect on that piston than it could on a solid forged piston.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
and that's why you gap your motor accordingly.
Yes. Clearances are huge.
You would never be able to get away with my clearances on a forged piston.
No. I'm close.
Yeah.
They don't have the cooling design's not there. It's more old school. There's no cavity. It's just hit. I mean, we have oil piston squirters, and we are definitely cooling our pistons, but not to the level you can do that in the common rail engine.
Yeah.
I would say EGT is like the main concern people talk about while driving, but I really feel Meyer's on something really solid. Like the thing you're trying to protect is much better protected with oil temperature. If you had a good oil temperature gauge or aftermarket oil coolers added or something to control the oil temperature, the stock coolers are very capable. They're great. I mean, I don't add them often, but if I was really concerned about that, if I towed heavy, if I was like, I don't tow heavy, I'm not a hot shredder. Like I see what some guys tow. I have a camper, I have some stuff. I tow trailers, but nothing like a lot of guys do. If I was towing heavy, I think an oil cooler would definitely be an external oil cooler, additional oil cooling.
With something to consider for sure.
Yeah, I'd really look at that hard. Obviously all the other mods, but especially if I'm modding the truck, I want some more power, I'd really look at some oil cooling capacity increase.
Yeah.
If you're hot shot and modding it, right?
Yes, if I want more power than stock.
I mean, I don't think it's bad to add on anything, but there aren't readily available kits to do that. It's not a common thing. Yeah. But it is something to look into. That's kind of an interesting idea of cooling that oil better.
Chris Patterson was showing me a kit that he puts together. He's given a couple people. He takes a Mishimoto transmission cooler or something, and instead of mounting it as a transmission cooler because it's a manual truck, he flipped it upside down, did some re-drilling, and then used that as an oil cooler. And he's like, yeah, it cools down the oil a bunch. I mean, I don't know if he has any hard data on oh wow, it does this or not, but I mean it's cooling down the oil. He has a temperature sensor for the oil and it's cooling it down, so it's got to be doing something. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I mean, to put this even more, because I know there's people out there that are like, you guys are full of it. You don't know anything about EGT. All of the engine failures we see, as we machine blocks or buy cores and stuff, almost every one of them that happens in this, let's say 500 horsepower and under tow truck, the vast majority of listeners' vehicles, it's usually a plugged cooling jet on a 12 valve. And you'll find one piston melted. None of the other ones have any signs of melting. And there's a plugged jet just on that one. Or the other, it's very rare to see melting on the edge of the bowls from heat, unless you get into a common rail where an injector is staying on. Yes. But on a 12 valve where the fuel only comes in when the pump commands it, very rarely do we see melted edges of a bowl on anything that's let's say 500 horse and under, doesn't have nitrous and things like that going in there, or tons of water methanol. It's generally an oil problem. The oil either didn't get to the piston to cool it, or it got hot enough. I would say the oil temp got hot enough that the piston swelled up enough that it started dragging on the bore, and it got extra friction in the piston from rubbing on the bore, glazing the rings. And then that one piston is there, and the other ones will be kind of early on in the melding. Well, you'll see scuffing heavier on some cylinders, but still it's generally an oil temperature problem.
It really is. Cooling system, can't overstate for you guys who are concerned about towing. Keeping your coolant in check, your oil temperature in check is much more important. I want to switch now to have some fun, because we talk about this sometimes here at Power Driven Diesel. I have we do a lot of 12 valves, but the same thing happens in common rails. I have some EGT problems. I'm nervous about my pistons melting. I'm going to advance my timing, drop my EGT.
I was actually I wasn't sure where you're going with that, but I was almost going to time you out and say that exact same thing.
But you love this.
It's people that, you drop you increase your timing because it makes your gauge read lower. So now
I can tow. I'm down to 1250 and I can just mob.
Yeah.
So commonly we'll have customers that put in a fuel package, and they'll call up concerned saying, hey man, I can't keep it under 1250 degrees EGT when I'm flooring with XYZ parts, and they're making 400 or 500 horsepower. And you know what our salesmen, or I trained our salesmen to say? Tell them to advance their timing a little bit. That is not making it less likely to meld a piston. It's making the customer happy because the gauge is lower and they feel comfortable. So it's rather than trying to
get some performance increases from it. There's reasons to do it besides just that.
There's advantages, but honestly, rather than bucking this trend of people we can argue forever on what is a safe EGT number, and it varies widely depending on the application. But if you add advanced timing, man, that number comes down and the customer's everybody's happy.
So what's funny is when you look getting into the nitty gritty of the combustion event, when you add timing, that means the fuel goes in the cylinder sooner, which means that it burns sooner, And so the reason the same amount of heat is being generated in the engine, logically. The reason that your EGTs are lower is that more heat went into your piston and went into your cylinder walls and everywhere else. It had more time to soak the heat out of the combustion process. Like that's really it.
Yes, it had more time to expand all that stuff. And hey, I made 100 degrees difference. That's how fast it's cooling off in your combustions.
Yeah, and like and like you said, when the piston's all the way up, you got a lot of heat there naturally, and then you just get a combustion process going. If the combustion process is happening closer to top dead center, that's a higher temperature that everything is actually burning at. But the piston goes down, it cools it off a little bit, and boom, now your EGTs are lower, and it feels
when
you
the
good.
piston goes down a ton.
Not a little bit. Like
I mean, more than triple or quadruple the temperature probably comes out as it's going down the bore, because power's getting extracted through the crank and temperature and all that. But just the natural, they call that adiabatic decompression. If you change nothing, and you lose a lot of temperature.
Yeah. So realize when you advance timing, you are going to have less EGT on your gauge, but it's not going to be any easier on your engine components.
Yeah, for sure. And so like people,
and it doesn't matter the application either, right? You do it on a 12 valve, it's great. You do it on a common rail with tuning, the same thing happens. You advance the timing, EGT comes down. You're like, man, I'm a rock star. I'm the greatest tuner on earth, man.
Yeah.
Your pistons.
But what are you actually worried about?
But I mean, in the race application, I'm worried about melting turbos. So heck yeah, give me some timing.
That'll drop.
Yeah, I need to. I have to.
Yeah.
I mean, for one, on a 12 valve, you need it because it takes a lot of time, those huge injectors to actually burn those big globules of fuel. That's a fun word, globules. And so you need a lot of time to actually have that combustion event happen. And I need that to burn in the cylinder, not keep burning in the exhaust tract. Because it's a slow combustion, that nasty stuff. You start doing different things, bigger turbos, intercooling, nitrous, of course, you can start bringing that back in because the combustion happens quicker.
Yep.
All that kind of stuff. But yeah, it definitely is a method for keeping your turbos alive.
Yeah, for sure. Also, I guess I want to take a pretty major step back. I feel like a lot of people know this, but just like really go over the basics, like what actually causes EGTs to get hot. And like the most basic form is your air fuel mixture. Now, anyone that knows anything about gas, it's like completely different. So just completely forget everything you know about your gas engine. Like whenever I try to describe it, most people are like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But you get these couple people that are like, no, it doesn't make sense. Like this is the experience I have with my gas engine. I'm like, okay, stop, time out, like forget all of that. Just like start from scratch. It's to me, it seems like so basic. Like it's like gas is this finicky like thing where it's too lean, it's somehow hot and too like whatever. Well, to me, it's like, yeah, you put more fuel in a fire, it's gonna burn hotter. Like that's as basic as it is. Until you have so much fuel that it's way too rich now, and to where the fuel is actually like acting as a heat sink and absorbing the heat, and so it's now cooled it down. And so the way I describe it to people is that if you look at your AFR from like call it a 2, or it can be, I mean, diesel's idle at like what 30 to 1 or something, and depending on the setup, like. I mean, it can be 3, 4, whatever, AFR to half. Sorry. That was a lambda. Let's do like 30 AFR to 5. It's going to progressively get hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter until you get to call it like 12. And because you're adding more and more fuel to the fire. And then once you get to 12, you're burning all the oxygen in the cylinder. And so now you add more fuel again. It's acting as a heat sink, and it starts getting colder and colder and colder. And so when you're like drag racing, you got big turbos, whatever it is, and you can capitalize, like you're operating on that peak, that's when you're melting stuff. It gets so hot that you can melt turbine wheels, you can melt dividers out of housings, tulip valves, whatever it is. Like that's where it gets hot, and that's it. That's pretty much as simple as it is.
And I think because most of the world has experience with gasoline engines, they've been taught, and they know when they get lean, they get hot. Like your header, your exhaust will glow when it's lean. I think the difference is though, on gasoline, if they get super lean, they also get cool, but they don't operate in that range. A lot of these cars, when they're coasting down a hill, they cut all the fuel off, but they keep the spark plugs going. And so any little vapors of oil or anything are still burning. They're like way lean and they cool way off. So gas does the same thing, but 99% of gas engines don't operate
in that.
They don't operate in that 20-to-1 AFR where it starts getting leaner. And so in that normal, let's say 14, 15-to-1 AFR, we're on the lean side there. That's when they get hot, but they actually cool off as well. But most people's experience, they never see a gas engine at 20-to-1, where lots of diesel engines operate at 20-to-1. They're quite
very
cool
happy
and fuel efficient and happy there. And if you go to 25-to-1, they're even cooler and happier. And it's the same thing. Your campfire thing's perfect, man. You put more fuel on the campfire, it gets hotter. But if you put a whole bunch of wet wood on top of the fire, kind of blocks all that heat and it gets cooler until there's enough oxygen there to burn it, you know? But
yeah. And so what's also like, if you want to get into more of the nitty gritty, I tried to make, this is like way back in the old days, I tried to make a spreadsheet, because when you start understanding turbos run off of, call it heat. They run off the volume in the exhaust. When you have more heat in the exhaust, you have more volume. Now there's more for it to operate on. And so that is why diesels are just, and turbos just work so well together, is that when it starts getting rich, it starts getting hotter. That's more energy for turbo spools, turbo cools down EGTs and cools down the motor, provides more oxygen. And it's like this self-fulfilling, it's just amazing. Well, I was like, getting into turbos, I was like, well, if you have hotter EGTs, then it's going to put more volume out the exhaust, which is what the turbo runs on. So really, EGTs are just a function of turbo efficiency. I was like, that's all it could be, because if EGTs were higher, the turbo would spool and make more boost. And so that's what I was like, that's what I thought. And so I started trying to make a spreadsheet that calculated all, because you can get like the flow ratios from Garrett and the compressor efficiencies and turbine efficiencies. And I made the spreadsheet, and it was actually kind of close, but like I would just do stuff with my truck and it would like, no, that's not what the spreadsheet's saying it should do. Like, why? There's a lot more that goes into it, because come to find out, turbos also run hugely on just the pulses coming out of the motor. And so when you change different things, like, a ported head or a cam, or even just the RPM range the motor's operating in compared to your turbo, it's changing the pulse energy hitting that turbine, and it's changing everything. So it was a cool idea. I didn't do anything. I gave up.
So why, I'm sure people are curious, why do EGTs go down if you have the same amount of fuel and you put a bigger turbo and it increases the air? And I'm not talking in the spool phase. I'm talking when the turbo's right in the middle of its, doing its thing. You put a little bigger turbo. Why does EGT go down with more airflow through the engine with everything else the same RPM, same amount of fuel?
So I think you kind of answered your own question. You said when more airflow goes through the motor, and that is the answer. And going back to my spreadsheet, obviously it wasn't accurate. There's so many other factors. However, it is true. EGTs are largely a form of your turbo's efficiency. If you're able to put a compressor wheel that operates more efficiently at that specific in that specific application, whether it's their towing RPM, or maybe it's your full throttle drag racing RPM, whatever it is, RPM, that power level. If you can get a compressor wheel that is better matched and it's more efficient, it's able to do more work, move more air with the same amount of turbine flow or turbine energy. Likewise, you put on a turbine that is more capable of operating in that range, it can produce more power to the compressor with the same amount of turbine or the exhaust flow. So it's like either end of that equation can affect your EGTs largely.
This really goes into a question we get a lot. We get calls a lot. We help a lot of people, which is why we started Power Driven. It's fun to do. And we get a lot of calls that I just got a turbo, not from us usually. And they say, and my EGT is so hot while towing. So it's like, we got this bigger turbo. Why do I not have more airflow?
Big turbo, move more air. Why no work?
Yeah, pretty much. And while at some RPM range, it will be better.
Yeah.
Just not where you're using it.
Yeah. Maybe it's 3,000 RPM, depending on your size of the turbo. Like I just recently on my tow truck, went from a bone stock turbo
on the manifold,
to just like a larger drop-in, one of our larger drop-ins. And when I first was towing with it, It was a 68 truck, so it loves lugging the crap out of the engine.
And you're 68, you're talking a 6-speed 68 RFE.
Yep, 68, so a 6-speed 4th gen truck. They love short shifting really good. And so I was towing with it. I was at like 1700 RPM. I'm like, wow, EGTs are a little hotter here. Like definitely a little hotter before. And because it was tuned for the old turbo and never got tuned for the new one. So
understand this, the bigger turbo is hotter at 16 or 1700 RPM.
Very noticeably.
Everything else the same.
And I was like, dang, like it's not that big of a turbo. I didn't expect that much difference. I knew I was going to have to do a retune. Like it was still very workable, but I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like a 63 millimeter turbo is not a big turbo on a 6.7 engine. So I was like, I didn't really expect
so you went from
much.
60 millimeter to 63 millimeter, just a small little upgrade,
and, like
a turbine upgrade.
And a turbine upgrade. Yeah, that's true.
And a bigger turbine wheel too.
And like say, the tune was set up very specifically for that stock turbo. It was opening the vanes up too much. Regardless, it was definitely hotter. I was like, oh wow, I wasn't sure what to expect. Like it's maybe a little hotter than I was expecting. I wasn't expecting that much difference. And so then I was like, oh, it's getting a little warm here on this grade. I don't normally downshift, but I'll just downshift it and see what it does at 2500. It was thrilled at 2500. I was like, wow, EGTs are considerably lower, and boost to drive was 1-to-1. Like
way better.
And that's at like, I think that was at like around 30 some pounds.
So give us a number. So at 2500, the EGT was lower than the stock turbo
I would
by
say
100 RPM. I mean
150 degrees.
150 degrees.
150 degrees. And I would say boost to drive, like with the old turbo setup with the stock turbo and compounds, it was probably been like, let's just call it 30 pounds of boost and 34 pounds of drive. At 2500 RPM now, it was 30 and 30. Like it was able to operate, and EGTs were lower, which really, when your EGTs go down and your ratio gets better, it just means that turbo is operating more efficiently. The turbine is flowing better, which generally means that there's less energy grabbed from the turbine, but the compressor was able to operate efficiently enough that it didn't need the extra energy and was able to still do the work.
Yeah.
So I was very happy with that. But if I was only towing at 1600 RPM, which again, a tune change would probably fix it. But if I was only towing at 1600 RPM, I'd be like, I don't know if this was a good change. At 2500, no brainer. At 2100, no brainer.
Yeah. Now the benefit of dropping the EGT though, is you feel like that represents a temperature drop in the cylinder of some sort. Because it's going to be more reliable. It's going to heat the oil slower. It's going to heat the coolant slower. It's more efficient.
You're obviously moving more airflow through that engine. No question. Even though the boost isn't any higher.
Which it's hard to say if boost is higher, because like boost is like by reference of how much power it's really making. So, but I would assume boost is down, and EGTs are also down, which is a great win all around.
But you're lucky because, like, say on your truck, it is a tunable turbo.
Yeah,
you can the thing you've lost, you can regain.
Yes,
and maybe not 100%, but enough to make it worth the upgrade.
Yes,
like it's a good balance
for sure.
Where like if a guy calls in on like a turbo that's non-variable, like you kind of get what you get.
Yeah, someone put a 63 millimeter turbine on their turbo on their 12 valve, and they use it purely for towing. They're gonna say like, "Hey, dude, this thing's probably kind of trash."
And they tow at that RPM range. Mm-hmm. If, for example, they tow so heavy that they're always towing at 2800 in third gear instead of or fourth gear, if they're 5-speed or whatever, then they might love that bigger turbo because that stock one chokes hard, upper 2000 RPM range. It really depends on your RPM there.
Yeah. So getting the turbo to work efficiently in the RPM range that you're going to operate in, we've said it before in different videos and probably on this podcast before, is so important. The turbo is sized to your RPM range. That's what you need to size it for.
Yeah.
And so the stock one, you can say, is good for your stock RPM range, but it's not designed to run the boost you probably want to run. Yeah. Not really. And so if you want to have like a good hot rod truck or with more power, there are turbo upgrades you can get that will give you awesome EGT control, still give you the manners you want, but it's very easy to go just a little bit too big and be like, man, I'm like 100 or 200 RPM wrong. Like if you're 150 RPM off where you're operating, your truck sucks.
Yeah.
Like these, you don't have a huge RPM band they work in.
Yeah, for sure. And like, that's also very, very true for like, automatic trucks. Like manual trucks, you can kind of drive around them a little bit more. You got a couple more gears, whatever it is. Autos, if it's a factory shifting truck and you don't want to, like it's a 12 valve where you can't really do a tune change or you don't want to have to put a new tune in it, like being realistic with what you're trying to do and the RPM you're trying to operate in to get the turbo to operate in that range correctly is a huge deal for sure.
Yeah.
And obviously that's why we recommend compound turbos to so many people, because that operating range is so wide, because you've got the big airflow from the big turbo to cool, your combustion anywhere pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, not any, but I mean, it's so broad and wide.
Super broad. I mean,
it's like a cheat code.
Yeah. I mean, if you like tow heavy and you have a single turbo, your truck probably has about 400 or 500 RPM window that it's happy towing in. Like it'll tow a little lower, it'll tow a little higher. It's fine, but it's not happy there. You put compounds on it, you have like a 1200 RPM towing window.
Yes. Much
no
bigger.
problem. And I mean, I get it. People are going to say like, oh, I got a single turbo and I have this big old towing window. Tow heavy.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you tow a lot, it's your windows basically the heavier you tow, the narrower that window gets. And putting compounds on spreads that window back out again.
A good way to like using EGT, this kind of goes back to you, like to use your GT to like judge your truck, what's going on.
Yeah.
Is what happens when you change RPM in your turbo. Like I was just driving the other day up to my family, to my camp trailer, up to a little park, and it has a small turbo on it. So what would happen is if it downshift and it would go high RPM, I'd have a really hard time with EGT control.
Yeah.
Couldn't do it. If I'd let it lug better, all of a sudden EGT was way better, but it didn't have the power. Yeah. This is in a 6.0, by the way, guys. So, it likes RPM.
It's just a Power Stroke
6.0. And so so for me, I'm like, okay, if I want to work at RPM, I definitely need a bigger turbo, because I mean, it's pretty happy up till it downshifts or unlocks a converter. And then EGT is like, even on the tow tune, just skyrocket 1500 degrees, almost melted pistons. No, it's fine. But as soon as I downshift, it really drop right back down. So, if I want to spend more time, a little bit RPM, a little more wheels, definitely need a turbine side especially. And it makes a really big difference. Yeah. But so kind of watch what's happening to your truck when it shifts. Is it getting worse when you lug it? Is it getting better? If it's worse, like, hey, I want to be down low and I was doing great and it shifted to overdrive and now I have EGT problems, your turbo's probably too big. You're not moving enough air. I mean, there's simple ways to judge that.
Great feedback on what's going on in the engine. I used to use my EGT gauge to figure out what my truck wanted for fuel economy. Whatever I could do to get the EGT lower increased fuel economy. And you think about it just from a simple like thermodynamic standpoint, the more heat that's going out the exhaust is wasted energy. You get about a third of your energy goes into the crank, about a third goes in the cooling system, and about a third goes out the exhaust. And so if you can have less exhaust temperature going out, because you have essentially the same air temperature coming in, it burns fuel and energy to heat up that exhaust. And so if you can get the lowest EGT possible, you usually get the best fuel economy possible,
which is the big key for advancing timing.
And so I'm gonna flip. I mean, I do agree. You can drop EGTs. You are probably creating the least amount of heat, which requires the least amount of fuel. Like on the dyno, when we do turbo testing though, when we're setting up wastegating, wastegate setups to try to figure out like where we want the gate so we can do real, kind of authentic testing, not just bolting a turbo on and like seeing what it does. Like especially stockish turbos, in a full power test, they may not care, but when you get down to like that 200 horsepower, 250 horsepower towing test, we've seen it multiple times where you wastegate a little bit more, EGTs go up, but so does power. And so
with the same fuel quantity.
With the same exact fuel quantity. And so logic there is that extra oxygen, working that turbo extra hard is bottlenecking the motor, and it doesn't need the oxygen that the turbo is giving. But because you do, when you wastegate, you are losing energy. You're losing oxygen going into the motor. Losing oxygen is going to make the heat from the fuel more concentrated because it's spreading out across less oxygen. Makes your EGTs go up, but you're not bottlenecking the motor anymore, so your power also goes up. So that is like
and I wasn't using that to just the wastegate when I was driving.
Yes,
I was using that to just my cruising RPM or which gear I decided to cruise in, or if the headwind was really hard and 80 miles an hour was making a whole bunch of EGT, and slowing down to 70 dropped 100 degrees, fuel economy would track very. just EGT is closely related to the load on the engine. And so anything you do to reduce the load generally is picking up economy.
Poverty 12 valve. Common rail, nah. When you got a good set of compounds on a towing common rail, EGTs they just stay the same.
They're just a number.
It is pretty amazing.
It's pretty cool. So you're going up a grade, making like 20, 10, 50, call it 15 to 20 pounds of boost or whatever. And then you give it more throttle, EGTs go up like 50 degrees and they cool off 50 degrees. It's like you start getting the power band where your big turbo.
12 valve does the same thing. It's just compound turbos. Like I had the same thing happen in my 12 valve. I'd have the exhaust spike and then the turbos come in and they're just back down as I'm climbing the hill.
Common rails do it better.
As long as the fuel line doesn't crack. Going to that another time. Personal
12 valve style.
Yeah. Anyway. But that's just compound turbos. But yes.
Yeah, no, it is largely compound turbos because normally when you give it more throttle, your injection duration's longer, which I know is going to create more heat, but you're also pushing the turbo further out of its efficiency zone, which is going to create more heat. When you have compounds and you give it more throttle, you're now pushing the loads going from the small turbo to your big turbo, and that big turbo very efficient. And so that's why it's able to maintain, is because the big turbo is like, yes, thank you.
Finally,
give me this. I got it. It's like a wrestling match where like the big beefy guy cloud taps out the.
It's true, but it never gets old. Like, I mean, I've been doing this for years. I've had compounds for 20 years. I still, same thing. The other day I was towing again. This is in Ruby, going up a hill and I'm about 1,000 degrees, hit a hill, goes about 1,100. Turbos come up, it goes back down to 1,000 degrees. I'm like, just mobbing up this hill. I'm like, oh, this is ridiculous. This is so fun. It's warmer, it gets colder. Just as you're climbing the hill gets steeper, your EGT gets colder. You're like, these turbos are just right.
and in that case, that's not a good fuel economy test, because if you're mobbing up the hill, you're not getting good fuel economy.
I am not a guy to test fuel economy. You should never ask me about fuel economy. I just suck at it.
So a lot of guys, they ask us, well, what are normal exhaust gas temperatures? Like if you're using it for troubleshooting a boost leak or something, what do you normally see? I've owned a 12 valve, a 24 valve VP truck, and a third gen, and they're quite different from the factory in what they'll hit with just stock, everything correct. So like my 08, it hit 1,400 degrees regularly, pulling a little trailer, stock tuning, nothing special. When I do a regen, oh my gosh. don't even look at it. You might be up there like dang near 2,000 degrees on a regen. Ooh. But I think they're trying to get the inlet temp at the DPF to like 1850, I think is their target, but they got to go a little hotter right at the motor to get there. But so it varies greatly depending on the model of truck you have. But like 12 valves, I think what Myra's saying, most of them stock around 1,200. When I had a 12 valve and I was towing, I would let it touch 1,400 for a little bit when I was towing with advanced timing, so I got more heat in there. But if my coolant temp was hot, I did not like letting my EGT get up in that 1,400 range, because the coolant cools the oil. Yep. And so although I didn't have an oil temp gauge, I knew that when my coolant was hot, my oil was hotter than it was otherwise. And so I felt like I had less window to beat on the truck before I could have a piston scuff in the bore. Very true. It's not like I was worried about melting the piston. I was worried about it getting hot, scuffing, hurting rings and stuff like that. And so to me, if I had to pass somebody, I don't care what the EGT gauge is. Like, you're trying to pass somebody, you're trying to get around them as fast and safely as possible. If it scuffs a piston, dang it, rather that than the head on. So, with that aside, generally, like I said, I didn't really like it over 1,400. But if my coolant was good and cool, 1,500 wouldn't even bother me for 20 seconds. Because I know the oil's not going to heat up that fast. And if the water has been chilling, right there, right around the thermostat is around 200 degrees, I know the oil's cooler, which means the pistons are cooler, which means I have more clearance. I have more headway to run that EGT high for a bit. At the same time, if I just got done climbing hill after hill and I can barely keep in the middle of summer, you can barely keep the thermostat from pegging out, I don't want to hang at 1,500 at all. I get nervous when I'm towing. I'm grabbing gears. I'm slowing down. Whatever I got to do, I don't like that sustained EGT when the coolant is maxed out. One, it heats up the coolant, and two, I know I have way less window of contingency there.
Everything works better in cold air. Wintertime, you can tow faster, tow harder, more power. Everything's coolant works better. So, it is a big deal for sure.
Yeah. And I think you nailed it. So like, yeah, like you're saying, like towing, I've sustained, I think it was like 1650 for, I don't know, about a minute towing. Like, but it wasn't, I was flat grounding forever. And then I decided to prove a point going up a grade. I wasn't sure if I could do it. I did. But if I had just been pulling a, 6% grade for 5 miles and then decided to be dumb on the last little bit, yeah, I could see something happening there. Like that could be bad. But like you're saying, oil temp was probably cool. I knew like, yeah, this motor's not heat soaked. It can take this. But if it was heat soaked, maybe it wouldn't have.
I guess really what it boils down to is the same story. Like one driver can have a truck go a million miles, another guy can get it and wreck it the first time he tows it. Yeah. Like, I mean, like it boils down to you, the guy behind the wheel. Is your truck going to survive high GT or not? I mean, you kind of got to know what's going on. Like we're hoping here with our experience, we can help you like make these decisions. But at the end of the day, whether it lives or dies is going to be how you treat it. I mean, you could take your truck that did 1650 and do the same thing, like you said, and melt it down.
Yeah.
You kind of got to be intelligent about what you want to do.
So let's talk about the race truck side of EGT, because that's another place that some listeners want to hear about, and we love talking about it. So let's start with the old faithful junker drag truck. I don't
know why I never had a gauge.
I did finally later in life put a gauge in there. The junker drag truck was over 2100 degrees at the end of when I was quarter mile racing it. With little, had HE351 and I had that HT 4B turbo, 83 millimeter, but basically old school turbos, not a lot of airflow, and it would get really hot, but it never melted a turbine wheel. I did eventually crack the turbine housing from heat on the manifold turbo, that HE351. Like it cracked clear through where it had an exhaust leak outside the housing, and it had heat cracks all through there. The head had cracks when I pulled it off between the seats. Never tulipped a valve, never melted a piston, blew out a few exhaust gaskets once in a while from that high heat working the bolts and they'd get loose, but never had a problem. So to me, I was like, 2100 is a good, safe upper limit. You're not really going to have issues. Then we start power driven. We got the Godfather. And do you remember when we melded that first turbine wheel? We weren't over 2000.
No, we weren't. No, that was the really thing that kind of illustrated like, the density of your exhaust matters as well. Like pressure is a thing, like the volume, pressure, whatever. Because I was substantially higher pressure everywhere. Boost pressure, turbine pressure. I mean, all my drive pressure.
And RPM was higher. I was at 3,500 RPM peaking usually in the junker.
Yeah.
You were up there
5,500. So the frequency of which the heat is hitting the
and
turbines.
So 1,500 at 5,500 with big triple turbos and a lot of airflow, we found that 1,800 is too hot. It will melt turbine wheels. It will melt dividers out of the turbo on the manifold. Yeah. The point where a lot of our trucks, we like to run non-divided on the manifold. That's
where I started like I do not want divided on the manifold. Any race truck, I will not put it on there. I will give up spool to save the 2 to 3 turbos I have on the truck.
And some people are like, well, how did that melt? I thought the same thing. You have a divided steed speed manifold coming in with a gasket. The gasket gets burned out and the divider of the turbo, but the steed speed's still perfectly divided and no melt on it.
Yeah.
So that transition there. And we thought, well, it's just because we had this Garrett. So
Will's like, these S400s are like, they can eat cement, man. They can take
so let's put cement. A Borg Warner on there.
I'm like, all right, let's put a Borg Warner on there.
So that 475 melted the divider right out of that 132 divided
no
T6
problem.
housing and wrecked 2 GT55s behind it. $10,000 bill. Yay for testing.
Yay. We had some expensive bills in our lives. That's true.
Garrett melted.
Borg Warner, they all melt.
All melted. Like it didn't matter.
I've not melted a stainless steel, but by the time stainless steel became popular, I was done with divided housings. So can't say if it would have survived or not. Maybe I assume it'd be better.
And most of the race trucks, the high-end race trucks, they're running a stainless steel V-band style, and they're not divided. And I don't even know if a lot of diesel guys know why the gas industry gave us those housings. I'll bet you they had problems on these high-end gas race cars melding dividers as well.
But I've still, even with that, I have melted turbine wheels. I mean, now my housing's no longer an issue, but I still have had turbine wheel issues. So you can get hot enough, your tips will start coming off on the very edge of your tips with enough heat. And again, it's RPM, it's heat, it's frequency, all that stuff. And so, yeah, I definitely watch my GT. Now this is a race truck, so I can say I watch my GTs, multiple probes. Thank you. And And yeah, it's a big deal to me. But I think going forward, I'm going to pay closer attention to AFR. That's something we're starting to play with a lot more here at Power Driven. You've probably seen some of our videos, and I'm going to start tuning that direction. I'm going to watch EGT as well, obviously, but I do believe the AFR is going to solve the EGT issues. And anyway, so I got
by going lean.
Yes, I'm going to go the opposite. I went fat. I've tried to go lean in the past, but I have not been aggressive enough with my nitrous, and I've not been aggressive enough with fuel control, all those things. I added nitrous and I had an excess of fuel, so I didn't go lean. I just added a bunch of power, which was fun, and melted it down. So now I'm going to control power while adding nitrous and not adding much more power, but adding nitrous really for engine management control, heat control. And I'm really excited to start playing with that a little bit, because not a lot of people do that in the P-pump world. It's very common in common rail. It's super common. And so I'm excited to play with it a little bit. Nitrous on a pretty rowdy 14 mil P-pump. Like, I got a lot of fuel. I'm not going to be using a lot of fuel, but I do like the big pump still, because injection rate's going to make a big difference on power control and all that kind of stuff. Like, honestly, I'm not running more fuel than you're going to run in Uncle Rico on that 12 mil pump. Similar CCs, but the time I need to get in there is way less. But yeah, race trucks. I mean, gosh,
I've never seen an EGT probe melted off on a tow truck, but race trucks, yeah, they melt EGT probes when they get too hot, and
exhaust stack. Sherrod melted that titanium exhaust stack.
Oh my gosh, yeah. He'll tell you that EGT probes start to melt right around 2400 is I think what he said.
Yeah,
you read a couple 2400 horsepower or 2400 degree pulls, and you don't have a gauge left anymore.
Yeah,
but it melts that Inconel probe right off.
But interesting story about that. I mean, we're talking, the guy said 2400 degrees, melted turbine wheels, melted titanium exhaust stacks, pulls the head off, pistons are fine. There's no evidence of any scarring, any melting, nothing. And he's running a lot of timing.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, if any chance of a piston getting melted, that's it, because the fuel's in there early, he's running timing, and the nitrous is crazy, and yet the pistons come out fine.
Now, so I have seen though where guys have melting on the edge of the pistons from that, and and I don't think it's EGT related. I think some people think, oh, you ran too hot there. I think they're losing ring seal, and so they're getting some of that flame front going down, and it's almost like flame cutting around the edge of the piston. I think you can have residual oil getting past the rings, and that's burning.
Yeah.
So you almost have like continual burning happening on the rings and the ring pocket. Yeah. So you get some of the burning there. And some of that has to do with like the crosshatch on the cylinder and how well that's holding oil and allowing that ring to make a seal. So there's lots of problems there on race trucks when they're melding a piston that...
everyone's like, oh, got too hot. What actually happened?
I did see a piston one time. My buddy Austin Olette, he put a nitrous kit on his 12 valve, and it was right in the air horn. And he sprayed it the whole quarter mile, and the truck was running, I think it was running like mid 14s on fuel. And I think he sprayed it to a 12, but just all in the middle. And he melted the center piston, and the edge of the bowl was melted, and it wasn't on the outside of the piston, and it wasn't because it scuffed. But I think that was heavily concentrated nitrous just on that middle cylinder.
Yep.
And on that one, it got in that danger zone because it had a lot of fuel on it because he was running way too small of a turbo. And so the nitrous got him just at that right. And so you can melt stuff when you get nitrous in there. I've seen piston bowls melt and stuff from that, as have a lot of people who played with nitrous.
Yeah, it's not impossible. When I say his pistons are fun, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's still like, it's surprising how much the pistons can take. But with a properly tuned truck. But
yeah, I mean, the fact that he's melting multiple turbine wheels and probes and everything, EGT
I guess that would indicate it's not a properly tuned truck. If you're melting turbos, it's not a properly tuned truck. But the pistons will
What
take
we're trying
a
to
lot
say
more.
is don't be afraid of EGT. It's not like this voodoo thing that's going to nuke your truck. Oh my goodness, I need a pullover. I hit 1200 once.
Yeah.
It's not
that
generally that problem.
So don't be scared about it. Learn your truck. Understand the operating conditions you're in. Is your oil already hot? Do you need to add oil coolers? What are you towing? How heavy are you? Like you say, use it as a load monitor. It actually is a very good way to measure that.
I mean, I was talking with the Hazleys. They do a lot of super stock sled pulling, and they don't use nitrous. They use water injection on these big multi-turbo 3,000 horse engines. They use EGT as a way to judge how much strain they're going to put on their motor at an engine pole. And they say when they go to a non-points, like they call it like a local brush pole or at a county fair, they will turn more water injection on, run their EGT down there in that like 1200 degree range, because they say it puts less wear and tear on the rings, because rings anneal from heat.
Yeah.
And so to them, they're using the EGT gauge purely as a judge of how much more water do we need to put in on a non-horsepower track, something that we have the fastest truck by far, so we want to put minimum wear and tear. And then when they're at Scheid or some big event where there's all these real high-end competitors there, they will pull water out, and they tell me they'll run their EGT up there. They say really mean on that's like 1400 degrees. More than that, and they start melting and burning stuff. We're only talking 1400 degrees.
Yeah.
But to them, they're using water as a tuning aid, and the EGT is their feedback gauge of how much water they're putting in, if they need more or less. And they've learned, and I don't pull with them, so I don't know, but let's say they could do 50 runs at 1200 degrees and the engine's fine. They might only be able to do 5 runs at 1400 before the rings are shot or the valves are tulipped or whatever their failure is. But their EGT gauge is purely just like it's like, how hard are we working the engine tonight at this sled pull?
Huh. Interesting.
And they even have their data logger read it, and it'll add extra water if it's over what they're targeting.
Yeah.
They even have like safeties where, your EGT is over your program limit of 1300, put on another kit of water. And on a tow truck, it's like 1400. Some people get scared. You're not,
no,
you're not going to do anything at that temperature most of the time.
Yes, that density, that RPM, the pressure of the exhaust going in these triple turbo setups. I mean, yeah, like it not what a number for your truck may make sense that doesn't make sense for my truck, and vice versa. So let's kind of know your vehicle, know what you're doing. God, it really at the end of the day comes down to you. Like, what have you built? Do you understand what you've built? Do you know how to operate what you've built? Or just put some parts at it and let's go have fun? If that's the case, we've all been there, but enjoy fixing it, because you will. We have. You know.
But if you called me 10 years ago, I'd be like, dude, 2100 junker, not a problem. Rock on, man. You're at 1800 your race truck, you don't have a problem. And they call up the next day like, dude, I melted the divider and the turbine wheel and all this. What happened? I'd be like,
what did you do? Yeah.
And then if that same guy called Hazley, they're like, 1800 is insane. Keep it under 1400.
Yeah, you guys are nuts.
And then the guy with the tow truck calls up and he's like, dude, I can't keep my stock common rail under 1400. I'm in thermonuclear meltdown. And we're like, yeah, I've logged like 1500 a couple times on totally stock trucks with a heavy load. And they're like, really? They're like, but don't worry, I got this tune for you. It adds 100 horsepower and cuts 200 EGT. It's just, it's the Wild West when it really comes to EGT.
There's a lot of variability. So I hope we didn't confuse anybody more.
I got pretty in depth there.
Yeah. I'm surprised how much information we had about EGT.
I think Will needs to bring in the junker sooner.
Yeah, I kind of.
That was the problem.
Where's the junker? So anyway, guys, well, I kind of feel like we've kind of covered the stuff I want to talk about, and we kind of have our time running about an hour here. So anyway, guys, I hope you learned something, and maybe something new on the EGT. And if you guys don't know, we'd love to help you out. If you have a question, give us a call here at Power Driven. We'd like to help you out. And safe towing, and we'll see you next time on the Power Driven Podcast.